You all loved my first downtime video where I went over all the possibilities of downtime. Well, now I'm going to show you how to run downtime at your table. What do you role play for and how do you roll for downtime stuff? Well, I have a ton of DM tips and 5 different rolling methods for you guys. So let's roll. Welcome to the Dungeon Coach. I'm the Dungeon Coach, and if you want to lower that DC in your game with creative homebrews and outside the box ideas, then hit that subscribe button right now so you don't miss out. We're going to go over those 2 categories of what should you roll for or what should you just let happen, and what should you role play for or just do a fast forward quick narration. Then we're going to go over those 5 rolling methods for downtime to keep things interesting and how to run it all off. So as a DM, what things should you ask a roll for? When you start going through what everyone does with their downtime, don't ask them to roll for literally everything. This is not moment by moment gameplay. I mean, you could, but then a week of in-game downtime might take a week of real life downtime. But for real, let your players say what they want to do and what they want to accomplish. And if it would make logical sense for the character to just be able to do it, then let it happen. You know, the rule of cool. Keep in mind, sometimes when you ask a player to make a check, this check represents entire days worth of work. So don't ask for every little thing, just the important stuff or potentially interesting or funny stuff. So then what should they roll for? Is there a chance, even if given lots of time, that that task might fail? Have them make a check. Now I know this could be said about any role in Dungeons & Dragons, but what I mean here is what we just talked about. Only asking your players for important roles that you want to highlight makes each one of those more meaningful. But we'll get into more on how to roll those roles in a second. So now during downtime, your players will be making all sorts of rolls. But for these next 2 parts, what should you role play for and what should you just fast forward through? So here's some things that run through my head as a DM on whether or not I should role play something. Number 1 is it important and needs to be given the attention that it deserves? If there has been a big lead up to something, like reuniting with a lost family member, don't just fast forward and be like,
yeah, you finally meet up with that long lost relative and yeah, you hug and stuff, cool. Okay, who's next?
Make sure you highlight and take the time on important moments for your players, your party, or your story. Number 2 is would this moment be an opportunity to show your players the world or foreshadow something to come? This is a huge DM tip here, but show the players your world. Don't just tell them about it and drop lore bombs on them. Does this town of yours have a rich religious history? Throw an NPC in front of them that shows them that, and you can convey this through this NPC while talking to them. And if they do ask about more information on this world or this lore, then this NPC can elaborate. And maybe some of the things this NPC has to say are very important or hint and foreshadow at things to come. They've heard rumors about something, or maybe a simple shopkeeper is actually a contact for an evil underground syndicate. Foreshadow little things here and there in these downtime moments that you can give your players something to look back on and be like, I should have seen it coming. Number 3 is kind of similar, but does this NPC have a quest for them or need to tell them some important information? Side quests, character arc side quests, and side quests that are actually part of the main story. I love those. I usually like to get across those type of important information by interacting with an NPC instead of just me telling them about stuff. Number 4 is would it be fun to do? I don't care how many times Percy needs to stock up on black powder. I want to see that interaction. Oh yes, black powder. So if you even think that there could be something humorous, then just roleplay it, even if it's just for a few seconds. Black powder! So now, what should you not roleplay? These are when you take long stretches of what happened and just fast forward and give a quick synopsis narration of what happened. You can get a lot of stuff done here and have a lot of time pass in a quick and efficient way. Now you can and should roll for stuff here, and we're going to get into that next. Another DM tip here is keep in mind that each of your players are going to be fast forwarding through their different downtimes. So make sure you keep going around the table and don't stay with one person too long for them to get too far ahead in time, and you keep everyone around the same page. Especially if you're going to be going through a month or more of downtime, once one player gets ahead on how much time it's taken them, make sure you go around to the other ones to get them up to speed. So here's some things you might want to fast forward through on your next downtime. First example is if your players want to go shopping at the general store for supplies. If you've got bigger and better things to do, there's no world building for that NPC, they have nothing to relay to the players, then just fast forward it. They buy items, they spend gold, you're done. And if they really want to do some sort of persuasion check for a 10% discount, sure. For the second example, a player wants to travel to their nearby hometown, gather up some supplies, and catch up with some childhood friends. Okay, you describe to them about how long it would take to do that and give them a little 1 or 2 line description of how their friends are doing. Maybe improv something random or interesting that happened to one of them, like Jimmy fell off a roof and got hurt, or maybe he saw something suspicious. Now you're off and away by yourself and you have a cool mini solo side quest. But we'll get into rolling for situations like this later in the video. And speaking of traveling around, number 3 is fast forwarding through travel. I did a whole video on how to make travel more interesting at your table with 4 different ways to run it. Spoiler alert, one of those methods was to just fast forward through it. But the other 3 methods are really cool, and check that out. Links down for it in the description. If your party wants to travel around through an area that they've already been through before and isn't that dangerous, okay, they arrive. Just describe to them about how many days it took of travel and maybe 1 or 2 lines of some description of things they saw along the way. So here's the overall idea here. Your players have a certain amount of time during downtime. They can decide on how long this will be beforehand or just feel it out in the moment. I usually ask my players about how long they want to spend during this downtime. And if you use my homebrew rest system, in order to get a full rest, they might need to take an entire week or more of downtime. And if you think I'm a mean DM for forcing downtime on my players, it's like feeding a kid vegetables. Because you know it's good for your players, but then they end up loving the vegetables, and then they want more This is an awful analogy. But however long they want to spend on their downtime, you are the accountant of time, and as they do stuff, you just let them know how long it would take to do that thing. And if they say anything that requires a roll, you just ask them to make a roll. And if a moment comes up, you can stop and interject some role play. So make sure to keep things moving and only stop for the good stuff. But everything I just said is fully customizable for the feel you want at your table. If I just told you that you should roleplay something, you could totally just fast forward through whatever you want. You could totally narrate some foreshadowing or them being offered a quest. If you want to keep things moving, you don't have to say everything as the character. You can just tell the player in general what that NPC said. Time out. Okay guys, this still feels weird to say, but I started a TikTok. Like what, are you 12? I wanted to get another quick and easy way to interact with you guys. I do DM tips and other videos for some more fun stuff. I'm still figuring the whole thing out. So get on there and search for the Dungeon Coach so you can join in. I post extra tips and teasers leading up to next week's video. Okay, back to the real stuff. So your players want to do something during downtime, and now it's time for them to make a check of some kind. Here's my 5 methods I use for rolling downtime. The first way you can do it is have them make 1 roll per day plus extra social stuff. Let's say your players are taking a week of downtime. Well, that's 7 different days to have an opportunity to make a roll. Set a DC for each individual thing that the player wants to do during that day. Role play any moments that you need to along the way, and that's it. Encourage your players to interact with each other during these times and not just do everything alone. You could say some gentle nudging statements like, so do you do that alone or is someone else with you? Okay, cool, so that's what you're doing. Is anyone else joining along with them? All right, we're doing downtime now. Is there anybody that's gonna do something together? I Jedi mind trick them into working together, and I'll even give them rewards for doing stuff together by sometimes making it easier. Whatever that DC was that one person was trying to do, they'll both roll at it, which is basically like advantage. Now, yes, they would not be able to get as wide a variety of stuff done, but they'll be more successful. Over time, your players will start to naturally do stuff together, and I've had some pretty awesome things happen. Like a tiny gnome wizard crafting a custom saddle to equip onto the barbarian and ride him around like a mount. Or even 2 characters that never had anything in common, but they wanted to become entrepreneurs and make a business together in a new city. A character helping to accomplish another character's goal can help bond them. These moments aren't just good for those characters bonding together, but the players playing those characters as well. Everybody at the table will be better friends. Man, that got a little sappy. Let's go to number 2. I call these roll trios. Man, that's a bad name. So comment down below an actual good name for these, and I'll use that from now on. I usually have these types of rolls be for really important things, or for things that take a number of days. I tell the player that they'll be making a total of 3 rolls. They make them one at a time with me explaining how things go and unfold in between each roll. They could be doing any number of things like crafting an item or creating a new spell from scratch, searching for someone, spreading the word or hope to the people, gambling, or any number of things that we talked about in that first video. Time out. I mentioned this earlier when the player wanted to go check on their childhood friend and they found something interesting. Give your players a little solo adventure that's just them all by themselves. You could boil this whole thing down to just 1 roll or make it a roll trio. There's a ton of different ways you can flavor this, to go exploring by yourself or go kill a creature by yourself. But either way, it can be a really cool moment for that player to accomplish solo and then bring that success and energy back to the group. I made the analogy in the last video about the Avengers and how awesome those movies are, but they become so awesome because of those individual movies make us feel closer to those individual characters. You don't have to put a lot of weight on these moments or make your players feel dumb if they fail. So let's say they're fighting that creature and you ask them to make 1 roll for it and have it be an attack roll or something. If they fail that roll, that doesn't mean the creature just swiped the floor with them. Maybe it got away. This also gets to the topic of failing forward, but we'll have a whole video for that. Okay. With these roll trios, you can modify the DC each time they succeed or fail by increasing or decreasing it. Or you can even have the DC be so high that they actually need help from the rest of their party. This is also where I use a lot of my homebrew DCs that I'll link down in the description. I mean, I am the Dungeon Coach. DCs are my specialty. Time out from the future. I finished editing this video and I felt like I didn't do a good enough job explaining this and how many cool things you can do with it. So here's some examples. If you wanted to craft something crazy like dynamite, you could ask them first for an intelligence proficiency check at this thing, then second for a dexterity proficiency check for this thing, and then depending on how rolls went, another intelligence check to see if they figured out what went wrong. Critical Role did something similar to this with Percy would tinker with his guns and all other contraptions he would make. Or somebody's training on how to do something or learning how to do the same thing. Maybe you have them make the same roll on intelligence, athletics, acrobatics, or whatever they're working on. And they would make more or less progress depending on how well these rolls go. And that's what I also mean about increasing or decreasing the DCs of these consecutive rolls. Let's say you set the DC for that first roll and they succeed. Now it gets harder and harder to accomplish that task as it gets more and more meticulous. Or something I've done a lot on the opposite side of things is start with a really high DC that would be really hard to get, especially at first. And with each repeated attempt, the DC could lower by 1. But until they actually hit that DC, it won't change. But once they hit it, then you can have it drop by 5 and keep working on it from there. Or if you want to use them for that side quest, maybe the first check is a survival check, the second's a perception, and the third's an attack roll. And each one of those could have a specific set DC or one that changes. And I'll go into much more detail later when I make that full video over crafting. So I hope this future timeout helped you guys out. Let's get back to it. Number 3 is an inciting incident. This one really isn't a roll, but it's interjecting something into the middle of their downtime to shake things up. And for longer stretches of downtime, you can do this multiple times. However long the downtime is, have some event planned right in the middle of it. Here's an example of something I did. My players were going through 3 months of downtime, so after each month, I had a big event happen. After the first month, there was a mysterious earthquake that shook the city. That's all that seemed to happen, and the players didn't seem to care too much, so I just kept on. But that was foreshadowing of something I'd done many times leading up to this. After the second month, there was a report of wildlife disturbances in the hillside that the city was built into. And also, strangely, the guards reported 0 sightings of any of the enemy forces anywhere. Still, the players saw this as clear signs and no big deal, and they continued on with that good old downtime. And at the end of the third month, the players accomplished everything they wanted to do during their downtime, and the city was now under attack. The mountainside next to the city avalanched, burying part of the city underneath it, and there was hundreds of casualties as the monsters attacked. Key buildings and structures were destroyed, and key NPCs were buried in the rubble. Can they save them in time? The players were well rested, but completely caught off guard. Time out. Now you might say I'm a jerk DM for rudely interrupting their downtime, but just because your players stop to rest doesn't mean the evil forces at work in the world stop plotting and scheming. I am huge on foreshadowing, and the players had many chances that there was an underground attack that was brewing. And there was more than 2 times during downtime, and even more leading up to it, that this was about to happen. But on a lighter note, the players accomplished all their downtime activities, and they had a blast doing it. Now they just have a partially buried city to deal with. So decide on how much of a relaxing time you actually want them to have as a DM, because I don't do this all the time, but I gotta keep my players on their toes. You want your players to think critically and feel like the world is alive. There's stuff happening in my world, and if you don't pay attention, some bad stuff might happen. Okay, back to it. Blocking off downtime into chunks like this helps keep your downtime timeline organized. You can juggle back and forth around your players and get them all up to date before each section. And a bonus DM tip is to group your players together too, so that their downtime can get accomplished together. This also accomplishes the thing we talked about earlier about that team bonding stuff. Number 4, downtime skill challenges. Surprise, surprise, I somehow managed to bring in skill challenges into yet another part of Dungeons & Dragons. But they're just so cool. I use these when the entire group is involved with something that they want to do together. Maybe it's a small side quest that the group wants to accomplish, or they want to create something that requires all of their forces used together. They want to go find something, or maybe there's a big social encounter, they want to try and get something organized together. Throw a skill challenge at them. Or if you haven't seen the video on this yet, it's one of my favorites. A 1-round skill challenge works great here too. It's like a skill challenge, but faster. All these videos will be linked down in the description. Number 5, a custom complications chart. You cannot do this method at the start of a campaign because you gotta get to know your players and their characters first. Find out how much they actually like downtime in the first place, and when they do have downtime, what do they want to do with it? Once you do that, you can instantly hook your players into loving downtime by just doing more of that. This was something I was already doing, but the guys over at Dungeon Cast had a great idea to make a custom actual roll table to do this with. They call it a downtime incidents chart, and you make one custom fit for each one of your players. These can be everything from small events to large events, and you can keep adding them as the story goes on. These can be both good or bad things you have on this table, and you let your players roll on this each big chunk of downtime they have. I have my players roll a d20 and see what happens. We're carrying this topic into overtime. I am gonna go over a few things that we could do with this here, but this video was the follow-up video to my original downtime video. That video got enough likes in those 4 days, so if this video has 600 likes in the next 6 days, I'll do a follow-up video on these random encounters you can do. Everybody, including myself, loves random roll tables, but I handle them a little differently when it comes to random encounters. So smash that like button because it really does help the video too. But here's a few tips for you guys for staying this long in the video. To make your world feel connected and alive, listen to things that happen, make little notes of them as a DM, and in these downtimes you can have good or bad results happen from those moments. This is also a great time for side quests that your players can go accomplish and get the closure on those solo things they need to do without the entire party being have to drag along. Maybe some of these options in this chart are hooks towards those side quests we talked about earlier that they can go do by themselves without having to drag their party along. I love doing this. You can bring back previous NPCs or introduce rivals to your players. These are characters that are in opposition to your players, but this doesn't always have to be in like a hostile type of way. Maybe they're a competing business owner against the business that you just started. Or they're the new favorite pupil of the master apprentice you've been working under. Timeout. Am I allowed to do timeouts during overtime? New rule, I can, but I only get one. Put masters, and you can also think of these as master trainers, into your game of the specific hobbies, skills, and interests of your PCs. This can give them more direct goals to work with and NPCs to bond with to make them more connected to your world. And I love to make these NPCs really weird and fun to interact with. Black powder! Okay, let's go. Throw in complications, twists, rewards, and more at your players to keep downtime exciting and something for them to look forward to and they want to do again soon. This helps keep the game varied away from just combat after combat after combat. And once they do these things, they'll really be looking forward to combat. And then when they do combat, they'll be looking forward to downtime. And with that, we're out of time for downtime. And make sure you hit that like button. It really does help YouTube know that you like my stuff whenever you not only watch it, but you engage with it and click buttons and stuff as well. Kind of like that subscribe button so you don't miss out on next week's stuff because I'm bringing you guys a brand new resource for making better backstories. Hold on, Future Dungeon Coach is back, and I just really wanted to say a big thank you. I truly feel like I have the most supportive viewers, and I don't even like calling y'all viewers, I've called y'all the Dungeon Crew. I feel like I have the most supportive crew in all of YouTube. There's no way we'd be able to grow as fast as we have, going to almost 8,000 subscribers in about 8 months. And to take things one step farther, I have so many supporters over on Patreon, especially for the size of channel we have, that's unheard of as well. I never thought that within less than a year, I could already be trying to start to make moves of doing this full time, and that literally could not be possible. All of these things around me could not be possible without all of you. And the crazy generosity continues because over on Patreon, I have a Platinum Dragon tier of $100 a month. So I wanted to give them a well-deserved shout out of RPG Zoo, David B, Aaron P, Reno 41194, Mason, Stephen P, Bob B, Purius, and Edric Kianse. And to go one final step farther, Edric Kianse literally donated this iPad to the channel that I edit all the videos on. There's a brand new camera that was donated by RPG Zoo that I do all my live streams on. And I had an entire streaming PC built for me from scratch from the newest Platinum Dragon, DC Artificer, which is absolutely crazy. All of you together combined as one literally make this possible. Like I literally don't know how to get this across. And to think about the future of this channel and what I could do with it, and even the future of what this could mean for my new family, thank you. Whew, okay, just know I have some big plans coming, so stay tuned. And until next time, stay creative and think outside that box. Peace.